Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name's Brian, and today I am returning to a favorite label of mine in Warner Archive, and this is a weird coincidence because I've done the last 3 weeks of Mondays with what ended up being classic films and even some pre-code films, and gotten some decent feedback about it, which is nice. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I appreciate those that have commented that they enjoy the classic film coverage because it's certainly something I enjoy talking about, and I'm glad to see continuing to come out. But I've actually got more classic films here, and I'm going to start with 2 of my favorite pre-code films. These are all new from Warner Archive. This is One Way Passage. It is from 1932, and it stars William Powell and Kay Francis, and it is just a wonderful film, just a beautiful romantic film about 2 people in dire situations that meet each other by happenstance and end up really connecting. And those 2 people, of course, are William Powell and Kay Francis. She bumps into him in a bar where he's just gotten a very special cocktail made, and he ends up spilling the cocktail and is initially flustered, but then he is immediately smitten with Kay Francis. So they have their meet cute. It's unclear if they'll meet again. They do this signature thing where they break 2 cocktail glasses and throw the stems over each other in sort of an X. And that becomes sort of a motif in the film. But so they both end up on the same boat. And Kay Francis has found out that she's terminally ill and that she doesn't have a lot of time left, and that her lifestyle apparently was a bit partyish, and that there isn't room for that anymore. Her doctor is saying you can't drink, no smoking, no, don't, if you're straining yourself, it's going to mean that you have less time. And so she doesn't have a lot of time left. And on the other end, William Powell's character is convicted of murder, which is explained in the film. And he's got a cop that's caught him and is going to take him to San Quentin to be hanged for the crime. And so they're both sort of at the end of their ropes, and it's neat that they find each other. The movie's really amusing because this cop that's dragging William Powell around is kind of a pain, but he's also got a decent side to him where he allows William Powell to kind of do his own thing a little bit here and there. And there's a great bit where Frank McHugh, who's a great character actor from this period, often played drunks, often played them very well. He is a thief, sort of a grifter too, that knows William Powell. And he gets on the boat after getting himself in trouble on shore and runs into a woman played by, I think her name's Aline McMahon. And she's pretending to be a countess on the ship, and she sort of starts wooing the cop and distracting him so that William Powell and Kay Francis can be together. Frank McHugh kind of doing the same, and Frank McHugh's just got a great laugh. He's just always like, ha ha ha. I can't even do it. It's not quite the Simpsons laugh, but it's this thing that he does several times in the film, and it's always amusing, and he's very funny throughout. But it's really neat to see them, just missing each other and then connecting, and there's a lot of hope that they'll get to spend as much time together as they can. And there's also this sense of William Powell being very worried about telling her the truth about himself, and she of course doesn't want to tell him the truth that she's sick. And so it's one of those things where it's probably not going to be a big deal, but there's a tension of like what'll happen when they find out their respective secrets. But it's just a beautiful love story, and I adore it. And It looks great on this Blu-ray. That's one thing I will always say about the Warner Archive transfers. They look really good, beautiful black and white. And these films are pretty short. This one's only 67 minutes long, so it's a really short and sweet romantic film. And I'm just really happy to have this on Blu-ray. Beautiful, beautiful film. So in terms of features, we have 2 vintage radio broadcasts, the Lux Radio Theater with Powell and Francis in the roles they played in the film from 1939, and Screen Directors Playhouse from 49 as well. Classic Warner Brothers short, Buzzin' Around, classic Warner Brothers cartoon, A Great Big Bunch of You. And I love that they do this. I've said this before, just having that sort of night out at the movies, thing where you can watch a cartoon. And I believe the cartoons look to be restored too, so that they're looking really nice, which is excellent. I don't know if all of these cartoons have already been previously released in other compilations, but I loved having them. So anyway, one of my favorites, definitely a pick of the month for me, One Way Passage. And then another of my favorite pre-codes, but a little darker, not as upbeat, is Safe in Hell. And this is from 1931, I believe. And it is directed by the great William Wellman. And he did such films as... he did a lot of pre-code stuff, actually. There's some really interesting pre-codes in his repertoire, but he's most known for things like the Oxbow Incident, maybe Public Enemy, which is, pre-codey. There's a movie called Battleground. One of the pre-codes I love is Wild Boys of the Road, which I hope gets a release. The Purchase Price, Night Nurse, Other Men's Women. He did Westward the Women, which is a sort of female-driven Western from the 50s. Anyway, he's a great director, and this film stars someone who I wasn't as familiar with until I had seen this film. I saw this when it came out on Warner Archive DVD originally, and the actor's name is Dorothy McHale, and she's on the cover there, and she is just fantastic in this movie, just really stands out and gets your attention. So she plays a woman who's become a prostitute, and yeah, this movie's very pre-codey in terms of the content, and she gets a call from her, I guess the woman who assigns her, escort stuff. And she goes to see this guy, and it turns out to be this guy, Peter, that she has this lifelong vendetta against, because basically she used to be a secretary and he came on to her, and I think it's implied that he forced himself on her, raped her, and then she quit the job, but his wife found out about it and started basically picketing all her new jobs, and more or less this situation forced her into prostitution. So she hates this guy, and he tries to come on to her again, and she's just like, no. And then she ends up hitting him with, I can't remember, she throws something at him in the apartment that he's in, and it looks like he has been killed. And then the flames start, the fire starts in this apartment, the whole place burns down. And so she's now in deep trouble because she's wanted for murder, and she has an old boyfriend who's a sailor, and he doesn't know about the prostitution. He hasn't seen her for a while. And there's a really sweet moment where she tells him at the beginning, like, he wants to marry her or be with her. And she's like, well, I can't do that. And he's like, why? And she explains it to him, and he initially flips out. And then the cops are banging on the door, and suddenly he goes into protective mode, and he's like, you know what? Let me take you away. I have a plan. We'll go to this Caribbean island that's on the route that I sail, and there's no extradition laws there, and you'll be safe there, and we'll figure this out. So he helps her out, takes her to this island, and it ends up being not a great thing, because she's the only white woman on the island, and the island is filled with sort of criminals and not so nice types, including a sort of I don't know if he's like a sheriff, but he's sort of a local lawman, and he's very sketchy and very much like the kind of guy who will do anything to get you under his thumb so that he can manipulate you and or make you his mistress. But so she's stuck in this hotel, this one room, and she fends off the guys for a long time. But things start to go bad at one point, and it gets pretty dark, the movie ultimately. But it's still got funny moments. It's still got moments that are amusing where she's just shooting these guys down, and they're all interesting characters for sure. Staying in this, Caribbean island hotel. But yeah, like I said, it goes pretty dark by the end, and so it has this full noir type feeling, and I've always really loved that. It's just a powerful movie, and also looks great, as I said before with the other ones, but really neat to have this one on Blu-ray, because this was one of like a pre-code that I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is good stuff. But Dorothy McHale, just really a standout in this. So the features includes Warner Brothers short subjects Pat O'Brien in Crime Squad and George Jessel and his art choir. Classic Warner Brothers cartoon Dumb Patrol. That looked really nice. That cartoon, definitely, for sure. But yeah, another nice pre-code Blu-ray from Warner Archive. I like they've gotten the new logo going there. That's very interesting. Okay, so that's it for the pre-codes. Now, we have a few more. I love thematics. I love to put things together. So the next couple films are from Raoul Walsh, director Raoul Walsh, who big-time Hollywood director, big-time auteur, known for things like White Heat, High Sierra, Roaring Twenties, They Drive by Night. He did a great noir western with Robert Mitchum called Pursued, which is on Blu-ray and definitely worth getting. They Died with Their Boots On with Olivia de Havilland, and she'll come up in this first movie here. But anyway, so it's two from James Cagney, both directed by Raoul Walsh. So I love it when they do this stuff. So we'll start with The Strawberry Blonde from 1941. And this one is a really sweet romantic comedy. Raoul Walsh obviously did a lot of action pictures and dramas and things like that. But this one is a really pretty straightforward. I mean, okay, it's not exactly straightforward, but it's a romantic comedy, but it's got an interesting hook in that it's set in the 1890s in New York City. And it starts with Cagney as a character named Biff Grimes, who's sort of an unsuccessful dentist. He is a dentist who learned his trade by correspondence school, but he's, made a business, and he's married to Olivia de Havilland. And then he gets a call on this Sunday when he's kind of getting harassed by some college kids that live next door that are, playing music, or they've got a band playing music that's too loud. And so he's kind of getting into that with them, and he gets a phone call about somebody needs emergency dental surgery, that needs a tooth pulled. It's an emergency. He's like, nope, not doing it. And then he finds out the guy's name, and it turns out to be this dude that he has a history with that he really wants to get revenge on. So he's like, oh yeah, send him over. And he's contemplating killing the guy with nitrous oxide when he gets there. And then we go into flashback, and a lot of the movie takes place in flashback, and it becomes more of a traditional, how they met kind of thing. But we know he's already married to Olivia de Havilland. But what we find out is he had a thing for this strawberry blonde named Virginia, played by Rita Hayworth in one of her breakout roles. And there was a lot of competition in this, part of New York, this neighborhood, for her affections, and she's very aware of her wiles and her, draw as a female. And Jack Carson plays the guy that, the character that Cagney plays. They're partners, but obviously he's the guy that we find. You hear the name and you're like, okay, that's the guy that he wants to kill. What happened? And so we find out that Jack Carson, who always plays a pretty good heel, he's just kind of a dorky guy who is always kind of like stealing your girl or whatever. And in this case, he gets to Virginia first and starts dating her, and they're apparently business partners, he and Cagney. And so anyway, he invites him along on a double date one night. And that's where he first meets Olivia de Havilland, who we know that he will marry. And she's a nurse, and she's forward-thinking, I think he calls her, or free-thinking. And she's winking at some dude that's walking by in the park. There's been this whole setup. There's this very interesting structural thing about the way that courtships happen back then, and that if you winked at a guy in the park, like that was really risque. Like that's kind of you're kind of a, like I said, a free thinker or somebody that seems a little loose with your morals even. It's just craziness. So their first date is that Virginia tells the Jack Carson character, well, sometimes I go to the park with my friend, and, if we happen to meet there, that'd be whatever. And so he brings along James Cagney, and James Cagney and Olivia de Havilland do not have a great first meeting. They are annoyed by each other. It's almost like, it reminds me of the date that Henry Hill has with Karen in Goodfellas. It's just like they're really annoying each other, and she's trying. Actually, she tries pretty hard, but he's just more interested in Virginia. And so it becomes this thing of like the idea that all this time he feels like what ends up happening is that, Jack Carson gets the girl. He gets Virginia, and Olivia de Havilland marries Cagney, and they actually have a really sweet little romance that we get to see play out. But the idea is sort of like his anger and his frustration is born out of the fact that he feels like the Jack Carson character kind of stole his girl and his life. And there's some other bad things that the Jack Carson character does to him that makes him want to get revenge, which I'll leave out. But it is both a funny and charming film while also having, some dark moments. But also it's just a really sweet romance, and all those principal players are really good. And there's an additional one in Alan Hale Sr., who in the flashbacks plays James Cagney's dad. And he's a very disreputable type. And, he's always getting in trouble, and James Cagney's trying to get him out of trouble or defend him or whatever. And so that's a really good part for Alan Hale Sr. But anyway, really, really good little romance that ends in a beautiful, moving way. And I had seen it when it came out on DVD. It was an early DVD release for Warner Archive. But I hadn't seen it in a long time, and so it was great to see it again. This is another black and white film, and just a really great Cagney performance. Olivia de Havilland is wonderful. So really, really good stuff from Raoul Walsh. I loved seeing, him do a really great romantic comedy. So this includes 2 vintage radio broadcasts, Screen Guild Playhouse from 1941 and a Lux Radio Theater from 1942. I love that they include those audio versions, of this material. It's neat to hear the differences, and how they sound and how they play out. Classic Warner Brothers cartoon Tortoise Beats Hare, which is really great. It's an early Bugs Bunny directed by Tex Avery, and there's some fun stuff with the turtle, and he's got other turtles helping him fool Bugs Bunny, and it's pretty funny. Pretty good stuff. It's a classic. And then we also have a Warner Brothers short, Polo with the Stars, as well. So that is Strawberry Blonde from 1941. Next up we have, now I didn't get a chance to check this out yet, but it's A Lion in the Streets, and this is also Raoul Walsh. It says, folks trust Hank Martin to be the voice of the backwoods poor if they put him in the governor's mansion. But they're trusting the wrong man. James Cagney as Hank, and maverick filmmaker Raoul Walsh, director of Cagney's Roaring Twenties and White Heat, catch lightning again in this powerhouse tale of the Deep South. When he reveals a local mill has shortchanged cotton farmers, Hank becomes a hero and a gubernatorial favorite, but his bid for office becomes a power grab that sells out those closest to him. These folkses, as Hank calls them, include the schoolmarm that he marries, Barbara Hale, a swamp siren he can't resist, Anne Francis, and farmers Lon Chaney and Gene Cagney, who rally to his cause. They're backers of Hank's meteoric rise and witness to his even faster fall. So, never seen this one, hadn't really even heard of it, but very curious to see it. Obviously not much of a comedy, but another, I'm sure, powerhouse Cagney performance, and obviously he worked really well with Raoul Walsh, so I'm sure this is going to be good. This one, a color film, looks like it is 137-1, and it includes a classic Warner Brothers cartoon, Duck, Rabbit, Duck, which I remember being a favorite of mine as well. So that is Lion in the Streets from 1953. Okay, and then lastly we have Clash by Night. We've got another heavy hitter director here in Fritz Lang, and a really strong cast that includes Barbara Stanwyck, Paul Douglas, who you'll recognize but I don't know as well, Robert Ryan, Marilyn Monroe, J. Carrol Naish, and it's a really solid one in terms of that. And it's based on a Clifford Odets play, and you can feel that a little bit. It's basically about a fishing town and this woman played by Barbara Stanwyck who sort of went off to make it on her own and sort of failed, I guess, and is returning sort of tail between her legs to live with her brother, who is dating the Marilyn Monroe character. And then the Paul Douglas character is a fisherman there who knew her, because it's a small community, and he is very interested in her, trying to court her. She ends up introducing her to this guy who runs the local theater and projects at the local theater, played by Robert Ryan, who's kind of a boorish jerk. He's a misogynist. He's got a really specific sexist view of women, and she immediately does not like him. The back says that, let's see here. May Doyle is a good time girl, but the times are bad. Weary of too much booze and too many men, she returns to her girlhood home, the fishing village of Monterey, California. There she finds security as a wife of devoted, dull fisherman and passion in the arms of his provocative best friend. So obviously she becomes involved with the Robert Ryan character. Film noir master Fritz Lang, The Big Heat, directs 4 towering talents, Barbara Stanwyck, Paul Douglas, Robert Ryan, and rising star Marilyn Monroe. This film is from 1952. In a stark tale of lives burnished by human emotion and shattered by human failings. Intense and powerfully realistic, Clash by Night from a Clifford Odets play is about many towns, many families, serene on the surface and roiling with desperation underneath. Now this has got a really cool single bonus feature, which I guess is probably ported over from a DVD, but I'm very excited to check it out. It is a commentary by Peter Bogdanovich himself, which includes audio excerpts from director Fritz Lang himself. I'm assuming those are taken from actual interviews that Peter Bogdanovich conducted, as he did, interview a lot of the big old Hollywood directors in his day, and tends to have audio of those interviews. And I've heard other commentaries like this, and they're great because you get the actual director talking, and you actually get him setting it up. But I'm very excited to hear his thoughts on this film, as obviously he must be a fan of it. So definitely one that I've been meaning to check out for a long time, and the cast looks really, really strong. So very cool stuff to get this on Blu-ray. Finally, this is a 1:37:1 transfer as well. But I did put this on, and it looks great. Nice black and white as well. So that's Clash by Night from Warner Archive. So a really good round of titles from Warner Archive for April and May. I think my highest recommends go to One Way Passage and Safe in Hell, but the Cagneys look great as well as Clash by Night, Fritz Lang, that I have not seen to this point. So lots of good stuff to check out. Keep an eye on Warner Archive. They continue to crank them out, and I'm here for it. I'm very excited for everything they're doing and everything they're announcing. So anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.